And then, good. So I was just saying that I had seen on Instagram just today, I saw it, but you've been doing it for a little while, how you guys had picked 10 galleys and then we're sending them and readers were sending them on. That's been so fun.
It has been so much fun. I had a friend, Andrea Katz sent me an arc of Pam Jenoff's new book that was like a traveling arc. And I showed it to Brady. And then Brady, did you find an article or you just had the idea to like I was
I
thinking
don't
one or
know.
two. And she's like, what if we do like 20? Because our book was supposed to come out in June and they pushed it up to May. And then the day before our cover reveal, they told us that sales wanted a new cover. And so we were like, we had such a short runway and we wanted people to read it and post about it. So it was Brady's idea and it was so smart.
It's been really fun.
Yeah, I love that idea. I was like, I may have to copy that. So the Comeback Summer, this cover is the cover that's happening. They
Yes.
just changed it last minute before the arcs went out.
Yeah.
That's why some of the arcs were delayed, I think, because like we were literally gonna reveal the cover the next day. And then they're like, hey guys, sales wants to make it more summery. And we're
Never
like,
mind.
summer is in the title, but we're really happy with how it ended
Yeah,
up.
we love the cover.
Yeah, no, it's really cute. And I love definitely you can tell it's Chicago.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's fun. Well, welcome. Sorry, I kind of leapt into that because we were talking about it, but we're so glad you're both here. And we've all been talking about how much we enjoyed the book and all the different aspects of it. So we'll dive into all that. But let's just talk a tiny bit about how you guys decided to write together and then what it was like writing a sophomore novel together.
All right.
I usually start talking about we call it our meet cute because there's romance in our books. I tell the story because it started off with me doing a little bit of light stalking online of Brady. We're both members of the Women's Fiction Writers Association, and that's like an online writing group. And through that, there's different opportunities to get critiques on your work or do a pitch session. And I saw like 250 or 500 words that Brady wrote. And I was like, wow, she's really good. I want to be her friend. And then a few months later, there was an opportunity to swap pages and I like jumped at it. I'm like, hi, let's do this. And I think we started with like 50 pages, but right away we really hit it off with, we liked each other's writing style. And we also liked each other's critique style, which is really important. I had somebody else who tried to change like every word that I wrote. And I'm like, you just don't like my writing and that's okay. But Brady and I really hit it off. And do you want to tell how we took our relationship to the next level?
Sure. So we had been critique partners for a while and both kind of pursuing separate writing tracks and getting agents and publishing and all that kind of stuff. And it was the spring of 2020. We were all in lockdown. I was home homeschooling my 4 kids and Allison was working from home, and we were just, I think like everyone else, sort of looking for something to distract us and keep us busy. And so we were just brainstorming ideas like we do. We message each other all day long.
All day.
and and so we were just sharing ideas. And she was like, I have this idea. And I had said, I had that idea. And then we thought, well, what if we put them together and wrote a book together? And then we said, okay. And we did. And it was a little bit crazy. I think our agents, when we told them, because we have separate agents, they were both like, are you sure? How well do you know this person? It's a big deal to join a writing career with someone.
And it's honestly like I have several pinch me moments. Like it was literally like we were on a Zoom like this, like just talking. And the fact that we threw out this idea and now we're like, about to publish our second book and we're almost finished we just finished the first draft of our third book. It's kind of crazy.
That is crazy. And, you're talking about your agents, and that was something I hadn't really thought about. How did you decide who would agent the two of you together as Allie Brady?
Both of them.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good way to do it.
They work together.
They do. And it's really great because they have strengths. And also I realized this just recently, they can play good cop, bad cop, which is great. And we're on our second editor at Berkeley, and our first editor was very good friends and close, worked a lot with Brady's agent. And our second editor has worked with my agent before. So it's really nice. And I know my agent has been like, well, Amy, who's her agent, like Amy's not going to be happy with that. And they're able to like play off each other. So it works for our benefit.
Put the blame on somebody else, but
Yeah,
still
totally.
get the point across. Yeah. I always tell my kids to do that. My mom says I can't do that. So that's a good way to handle it. And then I was so excited to see in the back of my galley, the beginning of the third book. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. So fun. Well, I don't want to be the only one hogging the questions here. So does anybody have a question that they want to ask them? Pam?
And I apologize if you might have talked about this before I hopped on and before the authors joined us, but how do you divide the writing? Was one of you solely Hannah and one of you solely Libby, or do you combine forces to do both parts? How do you separate that?
Great question. So each of our books has had two different women who have, points of view, and they alternate chapters. And so we have always taken ownership over one character. And it's probably fairly obvious if you know us who wrote which character in this book. I wrote Hannah, Allison wrote Libby. It's pretty obvious for anyone who knows us. But the way we work is we each write a chapter a week when we're drafting. So we each write a chapter. I'll write a chapter about Hannah. She writes the chapter for Libby, and then we send them to each other. We swap, we add them to a document, and then we read each other's chapter and critique it. And we go kind of back and forth like this over and over and over. And so really, we're both super involved in every single page. It's not like two separate people writing a book. We're very, very involved in the whole thing from start to finish.
Like Brady said, for this book, it's pretty obvious if you know us who wrote what. But for our first book, like, we didn't tell people who wrote what. And it was so much fun to have people guess, because, a lot of times, like, I had friends of mine who thought I wrote the character I did write, and who thought the other one, and Brady also. And it really is like, we both have such an impact on every page, on everything. But one does take on the bulk of the writing for that character.
Jessica has a question next. That worked great, Jessica, to raise your hand in the thing. Thank you.
I'm a rule follower, so
that's perfect. Let me know.
So two things I just wanted to share. One, I live in Chicago, and so I mentioned earlier, I really loved all the references, and in particular the Stan's Donuts at Broadway and Aldine, which I have been to, and I know that's Nettle Horse School right there, and Unabridged Bookstore across the street. And I just got so excited that I could place and that you used real references and real places in there. It just added a level of enjoyment to the book for me. But then there's another point in the book, and I hope I don't get the food right. You were talking about matzo brie, I think. I have to have a bone to pick with the applesauce or maple syrup. What about salt? I mean, just
okay,
all the time.
Okay, I'm gonna take this one. First of all, yay for Chicago. May 9th, we're gonna be at Volumes in Wicker Park, in conversation with Shelby Van Pelt. And so I hope that you'll come and see us. We're so excited about it.
That's awesome.
So that's one. Second, okay, I did a post on Instagram that I was like, I apologize for any Jewish people who read the Ark because I caught a mistake. It wasn't that one, but it was about the matzo brie, because I had in my head, I put syrup or sour cream. That one section is different in the finished copy because they print the arcs before we make the final edits. So I do salt and syrup, but I think that I was thinking about latkes when I wrote applesauce. And then I started Googling, and I was like, well, some people, I guess, do have applesauce with matzo brie, but I'm like, no, that's not me. I'm a syrup person, but I know some people do sour cream. So in the final book, it's different. It's sour cream and syrup.
For the record, I put neither.
I love that you asked about that. That's so fun.
I put neither of those on my matzo brie, which I have a lot of this week.
I love salt. I love the salty sweet combo. So I do a lot of salt and syrup.
All right. I'll forgive you,
So talking about Chicago, that was one of the questions I had. How did you settle on setting it in Chicago?
So there was a sort of a discussion about where we would put it. We felt like it needed to be in a city because this was a PR agency. It needed to be in kind of a major metropolitan area. Allison lives in Chicago. I have lived in Chicago. So we both know the city really well. And we thought there is such a great opportunity for like summery scenes with the lake. I mean, there's literal beaches right there, right next to downtown. And you can go out on the sailboat. And so it felt like a good combination of city and summery.
We tease that we're joining Emily Henry in her plight to show that the Midwest can have beaches too.
And that all the summer books don't have to be set at the actual coastal beach, right?
Yeah. Summer in Chicago is literally the best thing ever. Like, it's really the only reason people put up with winter is for the reward of it.
Yeah, it's so much fun. All right, anybody else have a question?
I have a quick question about sisters. Both of your books focus on just the sister dynamic in different ways. I don't have sisters at all, so I'm really intrigued by just watching the sisterhood play out. And I'm just curious if you both have sisters and if that influences your writing.
You want to take this one, Brady, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. We both have sisters, and ironically, both of our sisters are named Elizabeth.
Oh,
Which is really fun. And actually, the idea for this book came up with a conversation about our sisters. And we're really hoping that that's kind of our brand is either female friendship or sisterhood, and those really close relationships where each one has a romance. So there's a little bit of both. But those sisterhood dynamics are just so powerful. And Brady put it really well when we were writing something that, like, sisterhood is so complicated and beautiful, and there's depths, and it's a relationship like no other, and it's really great to explore. In this case, we were talking about how both of our sisters, we have different strengths, and we have different body types, and we have different issues and different things. And, you know, for both of us, one of the two sisters is, I don't know if your sister would consider herself plus size. I consider myself plus size, and my sister is very much not. And so we were both in a sisterhood relationship where one had, not to say that everybody can't have body issues, but one sister had like that specific body issue. And it was just, we had such an interesting conversation about that dynamic, and about how we see ourselves, how our sisters see us, and the strengths and weaknesses, and how it all plays together. So we dedicated the book to our sisters, because this book really, again, did start with a conversation about them. And again, it grew into way more than that, but that's where the seed of the idea came from.
I was just going to say that you dedicate it to your sisters. And I loved that when I was opening the book, just to see that. And you mentioned about your brand, and we talked about that because we met for 30 minutes before you guys hopped on, how much we like that in both of your books, that there's this relationship that's at the center of it, both times sisters so far. And then there's also romance, but there's more going on than just romance, you know, that there's a lot happening and a lot of interesting conversations and things to talk about, because you are focusing on the sister relationships.
That's our plan.
As well. It's working well. Melody, did you take your hand down?
Yeah, but I'll just throw it
Okay.
up here. Okay, so I have been to their Beach Trap author event, and also Brady's imposter event.
Yeah.
And I think that they need to show off a little bit for a minute, just talking about your real life. You should share, because I'm so impressed with both of you. Like your like real job. Like, you guys have real jobs, right? So
We
like, and
have.
so secondary to that, when do you find the time to write your combined book and then your personal books too?
Yeah, that's a great question. When do we find the time? How do we find the time? So I'm a doctor, and I, do that. And I have 4 kids also. I think I'm just kind of a person who I don't like having downtime. Which is bizarre to say, but I really do. I really like to be working on stuff. Like, I just like to be busy. I like to work on stuff, and writing is, like, I would say 90% of the time, it feels like fun, and it feels like relaxing, and like a treat, sort of like a step away from regular life. So I tend to write mostly in the evenings, kind of when my kids are sort of done for the day, and all that stuff is wrapped up. And on the weekends, I mean, just, I don't know, kind of fit it in whenever. I'm thinking about my writing all the time. So I take little notes in my notes app on my phone, and then put it into my document later.
That's one thing that I like love about Brady's mind is that like there's a lot she like thinks about it all the time and like has all these like she knows so much about her characters where I kind of have to write to discover it. So my brain doesn't totally work like that. Until recently, I was a senior vice president creative director at an advertising agency, but I was laid off at the end of February, which is not a bad thing. But so I've been kind of teasing that I'm taking this time to see what it's like to be a full-time writer. Because honestly, the publishing world, and especially like we split everything between the two of us, the only people that can really like write full-time are that like those superstars or people who have like a second income, like in the family, like are married or something like that. But ironically, I also, you know, Brady and I both have really intense and probably abnormally high work ethics. And we both like thrive on being busy and we're always doing things. So I have all day to write and I still write at night. Like it's very weird. Like I think it's just the time that I'm creative, and probably because of that, I don't get up early in the morning, and it's a vicious cycle. But when I am working, and honestly, finding a job is kind of like working a full-time job. But I write in the evenings, and I usually try to find like several hour blocks over the weekend. Like my happy place is going to Starbucks or a coffee shop and like sitting there until I either have to go to the bathroom or I get hungry.
Thanks.
All right, Michelle.
Hi, I really enjoyed the book. I am not a typical rom-com reader at all, but Cindy convinced me to give this a go. But I was curious, what do you hope would be the biggest takeaway for readers when they turn the final page?
Great question. That question always makes me laugh because I'm like, if we could say that in one sentence, we wouldn't have written a whole book about it. So we took an entire book to answer that question, but it's
just the top shelf one.
Yes, it's a really good question to ask an author, like, what was the main thing you wanted to get across? And I'll answer for myself and then I'll let Allison answer. I think for me, a huge part of the theme is how we get stuck in sort of roles and responsibilities and ways that we interact with the world. And we sort of get comfortable there, you know, in our comfort zones, and how it can be so good for us to explore other paths and be brave enough to step out and try other things. I tend to be more like Hannah and tend to be more anxious and worried and a little neurotic. And so I think for her, learning to have some faith, take a chance with, you know, giving Josh a chance and giving herself a chance to try a new career path. All of that was really important for her. I think it was a good lesson for me too.
I agree. I think that's something that we had a lot of conversations about. And I'm going to read what is it called? I always forget the name of the quote.
Epigraph.
Epigraph. I'm like, or epitaph. I always get them confused. So it's you can choose courage or you can choose comfort. You cannot have both, from Brene Brown. And I think that is a quote that really summarizes like the heart of the book. And you know, when we were trying to come up with a title, we were talking a lot about comfort zones, but we didn't want it to sound like a self-help book. Like it's, even though there is definitely an aspect in that. But I think that the idea of like our comfort zones like keep us safe, but they also can be holding us back. And then the other thing to me that really stands out is the realization the girls make at the end, and that their legacy, their responsibility to past generations isn't necessarily like doing what they wanted, but forging their own path, that like that's their legacy, and that, you know, that it's okay to choose what's right for you and to go for it. And, you know, as long as you're satisfying yourself and you're living your full intent and what you need, then others will understand and probably be proud of you if they're good people.
Thank you. Mission accomplished.
Oh, good.
Megan.
Yeah. So I put jelly on my matzo brie, which might be an unpopular opinion, but I was like, really, nobody jelly? Okay.
I love her so much.
So I loved both of your books. So fabulous and so much fun to read. But my question is a little bit about your writing process. So I know you talked about how kind of you each pick one of the characters and you go back and forth, but what is it like when you first get the seed or the idea? Do you kind of talk a little bit just high level about where you want it to go, or do you kind of outline, or do you just say you take one and go for it?
Yeah, great question. Do you want me to start, Allison, and then
Yeah.
pass to you? Okay. So we try to get it down to like the plot, to be able to summarize it in like a sentence. That's our goal. It's really hard to do, but the first goal is try to get it to summarize it in a sentence or two. And then from there, Allison I'll let you talk about the Jenny Nash thing because you do a good job talking about that. What I try to focus on, because we each have different strengths, I really like plotting and I really like story structure, because I think it really makes sense, and our brains like story structure. They like beginnings and middle and end, and they want to see change from the beginning to the end with plot points that make sense and feel realistic. And so we really work hard on figuring out what the different plot points are, and sort of what the first plot point is, and what's going to happen in the middle, and what's going to happen toward the end. That's sort of going to be the dark moment, and then how the climax is going to go. And then we talk about our character arcs, because we want our characters to start out at the beginning one way and end in a new way that's better and stronger. So figuring out all of their fears and wounds and all of that. We do a lot of discussion about that, and then figuring out what the lesson is that they need to learn.
Yeah. And as far as who writes what, it's been different for every book. And we've had a few book ideas where we're like, we both want to write the same character, but a lot of times it's really a natural, like there's, no character is us, but they all have pieces of us. And so I think, for the comeback summer, it was really a no-brainer that I would write the plus size character and Brady would write the true, like she's got some elements of
the anxious character.
The anxious character. So, but it's not always like who can relate the most. Our next book, Camp People, it's coming out next summer. Again, we just finished the first draft. And the idea for that one, like every book has been its own process, but that book, the beach trap, the very first scene in the beach trap was a flashback of when the girls were at summer camp when they were 12 years old. And the reaction to that scene was like phenomenal. Like that scene, like people loved the nostalgia. And I was looking at like a Goodreads review, and I was like, people were just constantly talking about that camp scene. And so I sent Brady a message again. We messaged all day long, and we're like, what if we wrote a book where the entire thing was at camp, but like an adult camp? And then she loved the idea. And so we have like probably a 5-page document where we were like, what about this? What about that? What about that? Until we found like a story that really resonated with us. And how this one I just think is so funny. The main reason that like I wrote the character I wrote is Brady was like, I don't think I can write having a love interest as a chef. Yeah. I'm like, I'm good with it. So I'll take that character. So that was the deciding factor for the next book.
True.
Well, that sounds like so much fun to have the entire story at camp.
We're really excited about it.
Yeah.
Those kinds of stories seem to really resonate with people too. All right, Pam.
I've got a quick question, but first I want to mention to Brady that with your writing and your 4 kids and your doctor career, I am very, very impressed that your bookshelves are so nicely colored.
Well,
no,
thank you.
I wondered where the two of you live now.
I live in Salt Lake City.
Right.
And I'm in Chicago, downtown Chicago. But it's funny, Brady is so organized, and we were talking just this weekend and she was describing her husband, and I'm like, you're also describing me. Like,
because we were cleaning the garage, and the scene in the comeback summer when Hannah goes to Josh's office and it's a mess and she helps him clean it. I messaged Allison and I was like, this is what we're doing with my husband's workroom.
And I was like, well, that's me too. I'm pretty sure though, didn't you? I think her husband and I are the same, like ENFJ. Like,
yeah, the same.
She's got her work wife and her like life husband, and we're like,
yeah.
Well, I had a question about Louise, not loser, who inspired that, because we were talking ahead again, and I was saying there had to be somebody that at least you got some nugget of an idea from on that.
Well, I have a question. Does anybody remember Lou from the beach trap?
No. She was in there. Yeah. Go ahead, Allison.
Okay,
Yeah,
I did not, and I loved that book. So, okay, now I'm gonna have to go back and find her in there.
when Kat is driving from Atlanta to Destin and she's listening to a self-help podcast,
It's
it's
that
Lou.
one.
It's like a very subtle mention. But I think like to us, she's always been Kristen Chenoweth.
We've imagined her looking like Kristen Chenoweth. I sort of, I don't know if anybody knows who Brooke Castillo is. She does, she's a life coach and she has this massive podcast. When we were trying to work on some of the journal entries, I wrote most of those, the little prompts for the journal entries. I went to Brooke Castillo's website and I went to several other different self-help people's website to just read like what the pacing was on the types of things that they wrote. There's a very distinctive style that these people write in. It's very interesting. And so that was sort of inspired by her and a bunch of other self-help podcasters.
You wrote all of them and she did a great job with the journal entries. It's been really fun hearing people, like that's another thing that people have really responded to. And we're working on trying to get like a PDF or something and maybe sharing on Instagram some of the blank ones so people can fill them out for themselves.
Oh, that would be fun because I was saying how much I liked that too. I always love when there's a creative format, something different that's inserted into a story that just really always resonates with me. So I loved that. And I love Kristen Chenoweth. So I was happy to see that you had referenced her in the book. But I was just curious with like the 12-week challenge. And as you said, kind of that speak that you see in the self-help industry, kind of where you got the inspiration for that.
This book was definitely a challenge to write. Like, again, we had that like seed of an idea about the sisters kind of trying to do different things outside of their comfort zones. And we sent it to our agents, and our agents are really good, which sometimes is annoying because they're like, you can do better. And we're like,
yeah, they're like, this is not as good as it needs to be.
We're like, but. And so we turned to a bunch of our writer friends and we're brainstorming ideas. And then just to up the conflict and the tension, like Lou came in with like the business aspect and things like that. So it was very like, we're so proud of how it came together, but it was definitely like more bringing in a piece of that to create the world and to create the arc and the characters. So this book was more of a challenge, but we're really proud of how it came together. Hopefully it doesn't read like it was a challenge.
No, I thought everybody was talking about how fast they read it, that it was a really quick, compelling read. They wanted to get to the end, know what happened. And that just made me lose my question. Oh, yes. So speaking about like anxiety and the body issues, how I felt you did a really great job of representing that and getting into the characters' heads, talking about anxiety and how it impacts that person or the body issues. Did that take a lot of work?
We did do a lot of talking about this and a lot of sort of individual work and work together on it, because one thing that we talked about from the beginning is we didn't want the story to be about anxiety or about body image issues. We wanted those to be aspects of the characters that made them who they are, but not the only thing about them. And I do have a bit of a pet peeve in books where someone's like mental health issue is the entire story or is the entire character arc, because it doesn't go away. Like body image issues do not just immediately vanish because you learn your life lesson, and you don't become not depressed or anxious because you finish the end of the book, right? So we really worked hard on trying to represent it and really show people who just sort of live with these issues as part of themselves. And hopefully in a positive way. Hannah takes medication and she's done therapy and she's in a pretty stable place at this point in the book. And so we wanted to show somebody who's just sort of living with that. Allison, do you have more to add?
It was really, really hard for me. And I think that it was hard for a couple of reasons. And I actually wrote like an entire essay about it. We were like, we're not going to do essays this time. And I woke up with this idea and I just wrote it out.
It's going to be on today.com, by the way.
Hey,
today.com is going to publish it. It's not yet, but soon.
So excited. Thank you. So for me, it was really, really hard. It was also thrilling and exhilarating and freeing. And one of the things I talk about in the essay is, they say to write what you know. So I've never written a skinny character. Like I've never written a skinny character, but I've written body neutral characters. And this is the first time that I've ever written a character that's truly plus sized. And it was like therapeutic to be able to be like, the scenes where Libby is like remembering shopping with her friends and like she buys an accessory, and like those are all things that like are from my life and my experiences and things like that I could relate to. So it was great being able to put some of that like into the world. But one of the problems there were two big problems. One was that I had to give Libby like self-growth that I don't have yet. And so that was really hard because and again, we talk about this in the essay, there was one scene where Brady was like, she should have a moment here where she loves her body. And I was like, no way, she's not there yet. And I was like, well, wait a second, I'm not there, but maybe she can be there. And it was just a really interesting process. Like, I am not her and she is not me. Like, I learn from her and I'm inspired by her, but I had to give her growth that I don't have. So that was one thing that was really challenging. The other thing that was really challenging is, again, like, we didn't want to be triggering so far, and Brady doesn't read the reviews, but I do. And thank you, everybody. It's been so fun seeing so many reviews posted from this group. Like, it's been so fun. But there was one person so far who couldn't read it because it was triggering, and I 100% respect that. And we worked really, really hard to try to make it not triggering. Like, we wanted it to be authentic, but like, and again, Brady, like, we work so closely and so well together that, you know, where Brady was like, okay, she can be critical of her body, but could she appreciate her body? Can she like love her butt or love her boobs, or like have a moment where there's a little bit of positivity? And Brady took out some of the self-deprecating things that were a little bit very realistic, at least for what's in my head of myself, but like that could potentially be triggering, or that were like fat shaming or fat phobic or anything like that. So we worked really hard to make it authentic, but not triggering.
Well, I appreciated that. And the issue that we have dealt with in our household is the anxiety. And so I just know that, you know, it's a difficult thing. And so I just felt that you all did a really great job of portraying that. And Carmen had said the same thing you said, Brady, that it was just parts of their personality versus the entire thing about the body issues or the anxiety, that it just was, you know, a portion of them, just like everything else was. And we all really liked that.
Good.
One other thing to mention about that is that, and we said that the arc is not exactly like the final book. One of the changes is that in the arc, there's an author's note. And that is something that has become very, very, very common, kind of like trigger warnings and all that kind of stuff. And in the finished version, we actually lost the author's note because we had like so much conversation between us. It was like a deadline where we're like, we need this author note. So we worked on it really hard. And then the more we thought about it, it just didn't feel quite right. And so we were going back and forth, and Brady had an amazing suggestion, that we move to the acknowledgements, where we kind of talk about it and acknowledge the, you know, like that aspect of it. But we ended up losing the author's note. So we'll see if that has an impact when people read it.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because I love the author's notes in the galley, and you rarely see them in finished books. I mean, you just don't see them very often. So initially I was always telling people, and there's this great letter in the front, and then people buy the book and they're like, I don't have a letter. And so I didn't realize that was such a thing, you know? And so I don't think it's uncommon to lose the letter either, because it seems like that happens more often than not.
Yeah.
What about the online dating stories? A couple of those guys.
Well, I've been married for 20 years, and I started dating my husband when I was 20. So I have not ever online dated, and I have not dated anyone for a very long time. So I had to ask Allison for help. I don't even know how dating apps work at all. So we had to ask Allison for some help. And then my sister right now is happily married, but it was a few years ago. She was on the apps, and I would hear all these stories, and it was just sort of like secondhand traumatizing as I heard everything.
I actually, when we were drafting this, I got back on the apps and I was like, all right, I'm writing about this. Like, let's just get back out there for like a hot minute. And it was just a hot minute. And then I'm like, no.
It just seems so daunting.
Yes. But it is almost like a fun game, like the swiping, and, you know, with Libby, especially because it's like, it's not for her, but it's just, it's fun. And I loved the scene where Hannah was like, you have to look into these guys.
Yeah, no, that was great. The first date she had, she's like, what the heck? Come on, Libby. That was really funny. I enjoyed that. So does anybody else have any questions? I don't want to take up all of the, anybody else? Well,
Just
is there any?
sorry, Cindy. I just quickly wanted to ask, I'm assuming that the same cover designer did both, because it comes off as your vibe a bit, I think, and they're beautiful, bright covers. So I was just wondering, was it the same person?
It was. Yep. And we were really specific on how we wanted this one to look. We sent actual photographs of like the scene of the Chicago skyline that we wanted.
But we were so
Beautiful.
lucky, and both of us with our solo books have been, ended up with great covers, but like the process was a lot more stressful. And when we were brainstorming what we wanted our covers to look like, part of it was we're not romance, we're not women's fiction. The cartoon covers are like having such a heyday. We wanted the cartoon, but like we wanted not cartoon, but illustrated. And we wanted it to be a little bit more elevated because there was that like more serious aspect to it. And Brady found like a Miami Art Deco poster and sent it to me, and I'm like, oh my God, yes. And so we just started pulling all these Art Deco posters, and it just, that vibe feels unique and ownable. And so hopefully they'll let us keep going with it. But the designer like nailed it the first time. We had a couple tiny tweaks, but they did a really good job.
What was the difference with the cover that you had and then the cover that had to change at the last minute?
Oh, the original cover
I
was
show
really
it?
cute. Do you have it, Allison?
I have it saved in my favorites. I loved it.
We'll show it to you guys. It's really cute. I personally think the cover that we ended up with is more marketable, and I think it'll stand out better, but it was really cute and unique. So anyway.
So here's this one. I'm going to show it. And if you guys can see it, I'll show you one other thing.
Can you see that?
Oh yeah. Okay. So are they walking? Is that what's
They're
happening?
walking, yeah.
Okay, got it.
So the thing that I loved about this, and hopefully we'll be able to show it at some point publicly. But when Brady came to Chicago for us to research, one of the best things about riding with your best friend is you can go on vacations and like call it research, and it's tax deductible. We had her husband, who is like an absolute saint. Like he's such a good Instagram husband. We had him like literally, we went to the lakeshore and we tried to do like a photo of us in the same spot.
Oh, I love that.
And Berkeley did an animation. I don't know if it will play, and it might be too hard to play, but they did an animation where we went from our photo to the cover, like swapping, and it was so cool.
It was really, really cute.
It was really cool. But they wanted it to be more summery, and we do love how it ended up, and it looks really pretty next to the beach trap.
No, I agree completely. I'm just always fascinated with covers, as you know. So I'm curious to hear what happened and how it came about. And, you know, that was one of the fascinating things that I also learned early on, was how much sales has a say in covers and how they can really send it in a completely different direction sometimes. And I did not know that until I started doing more of this.
Sales has a lot of power. They were the ones who wanted to move our book up from June 6th to May 9th, and they wanted it to be more summery. So we're hoping that means that they're pushing it and that they're gonna, you know, because it is such a seasonal book that I think they just wanted it to be on sale longer for the summer, which we are not complaining about at all.
Well, and I think that's so smart, because it drives me crazy when these books come out end of June, middle of July for summer, because half the summer's gone, at least for us, you know. And so I feel like when you're looking at summer lists and all of that, May is perfect because the book is out, you can get it on a list and people can find it immediately. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to do great. Anybody else?
Well, I wanted to ask if both of you or one of you have done that down and dirty event.
No, and as we were talking about, you know, our research process, Allison was like, I am not doing that.
No way.
And I was like, me neither. The one big difference between me and Hannah is I hate running. I will never run. So what did we do for research? I mean, we did a lot of online research, and you talked to someone who's done.
I have a couple friends who are like obsessed with them, and so they gave some notes. And another really great thing about writing with each other is that there are two of us. So if because we're on schedules a lot of times, and if one's falling short, the other can pick up the slack. And for me, again, it's not a bad thing that I was laid off, because my job was I was literally burnt out, right toward the end of drafting this book. I was working around the clock trying to write, not sleeping, on a big business trip, and high stress. And it was it was not pretty. And Brady was like, I'm worried that we're not going to finish it. And so we were trying to figure out how she could help. And she'd done so much research on the working out and the athletic activities. So she actually did the first draft of that chapter where
The final chapter, yeah.
Libby's chapter, where she's doing that. And then I went back and like edited it and like, changed some things that I wanted to for Libby, but it was amazingly helpful for me, like, because again, we're really one team for it. But I was really glad because she did such a much better job of writing the athletic stuff than I would have.
Well, I'm going to find a Down and Dirty event here in Salt Lake. So Allison, you can come in for research and
I'm
I'll
not
come cheer
doing
you
it.
on.
I did try to go to, there is a gym, the Windy City gym. We changed the name of it.
Ninja gym, a ninja gym.
Ninja gym.
Yeah.
We changed the name of it and changed the location because we wanted to get as many iconic Chicago elements as we could. So we wanted to have Adam and Libby have drinks down by the river. So we moved the location of the imaginary gym, and I was gonna try to go to that, but they were very like, I just didn't, but I thought about it. Do I get credit?
You walked by it. You're like, there it is.
You Googled it.
I watched videos of the gym, and Brady was like, wow, good job. You got all these details. I was
I
like,
know.
like the Google video.
You're like, that's the great thing about the internet.
It is.
I do think the way you guys nailed Chicago and making the actual streets and the places and everything just makes the setting come alive. And I always like that.
Thank you. That's something that is like a layer that gets added on a little bit toward the like later drafts. We were like, Chicago is a character. We wanted it to be a character. So we're like, how can we, there was a scene where Libby and Hannah are walking up the ramp to get onto Lakeshore Drive. And Brady was like, paint it for us more. And so I literally went and I did that one. I walked from my house up to the lake and took videos and pictures and really like tried to get take in the sensory details of it. So that came in later drafts, but we're glad that came through.
Yeah, it definitely did. So good. Well, anybody else before we go? Just making sure Jessica has to hop off. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with us. This was so much fun.
Thank you. We so appreciate everybody reading and love seeing the reviews. And this is our first time talking to people about the book. So it's so fun.
Mm-hmm. So fun.
Great.
Thank you so much.
And I saw
Do you
my
want to take a
name in the
picture,
back.
Cindy?
Thank you. Oh, yes, a picture. Yes, thank you.
Oh.
I never remember the darn picture. So let me do that. Okay, ready? Oh, I was gonna say I've got mine. I'm gonna try it. Well, I can't really pull. I'll try.
Mine was Kindle.
Okay, I'm not gonna be able to. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna try to see if I can. I don't know how I can hold mine, and also I don't think I can. All right. Well, thanks everybody. This was so much fun, and good luck, girls, with it going out into the world. Good luck, women, with it going out into the world.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Bye.